please welcome Conference Technical Chair Daron Nishimoto to the stage.
All right, I have the pleasure of introducing the next invited talk, Colonel Jonathan Whitaker. He's the Chief of Staff, NATO Combined Forces Space Component Command, and the Director of the NATO Space Operations Center, Ramstein Air Base in Germany. He's the Principal Space Advisor to the Supreme Allied Commander for Space Domain Awareness, Space Domain Coordination, and Operational Space Support for the 32-member alliance. Man, you got a lot of positions there, sir. In this role, Colonel Whitaker leads a multinational alliance team of space professionals in an operational oversight of the NATO space mission area. Additionally, he leads the development of the fledgling NATO Operations Center, NATO's SDA hub, and previously he served as the Director of Space Forces United States Southcom. Colonel Whitaker is married to his lovely and talented Miss Jennifer Whitaker, with whom he has 3 beautiful daughters. Wow, congrats. Lauren, 18, Holly, 16, and Olivia, 11. And this is just a little known fact here. As a high school graduate myself from Mannheim, Germany, I know the sacrifice it took to get here. So I really appreciate the travel sacrifice. And I'm guessing it was a 30-hour plus flight with a 12-hour time difference. So please help me welcome Colonel Whitaker.
Well, I can just say good evening to you all because it's 10 o'clock on my body. Everybody get a snack? You've come to the right session. This is going to be fun. Looking good in these Hawaiian shirts. I took a slightly different tact and dressed as a bush for this, so I hope you don't mind. But I want to thank you, Daron, for that gracious introduction. And I don't want to miss this opportunity because I'm here among friends, a lot of familiar faces, a lot of folks that have helped me out, helped out the organizations that I've been part of, and Daron is chief among them. Daron lent his time and his intellect to US Southcom a few years ago, and he did the initial design work on our mobile telescopes that formed the basis of our Significant Security Cooperation Initiative. And it's when I suggested to Daron that we mount those telescopes on the top of a Winnebago that he realized that he was dealing with an optics heavyweight. On a serious note, though, Daron, the work that you supported was the first of its kind for the Space Force. I truly mean that. It was a game changer, and it ushered in the era of space security cooperation for the US. Indeed, there are many folks here today, and hopefully some of them are sitting here for this session, that share in that success. And if you'll indulge me, Joe Gerber, who's sitting next to Daron, has been my partner in crime. Ryan Swindle, Dr. Francis Chun, Mark Nichols, Justin Lee, Deanna Riles, Justin Fletcher, Matt Tompkins, Channing Chow, Tim Tishua, Michael Curry, Armando Drain, Kevin O'Rourke, Barb Golf, Zach Gazak, so many more. And if I forgot to name you, you can redeem one beer on me later if you can catch me. So my job is the senior guardian at the NATO Allied Command Operations, and there I've become a bit of a space evangelist throughout the alliance. While no one would fault you for assuming that's the reason I'm here today, you'd be wrong. The real reason is because I begged Joe to put in a good word with AMOS so I could come speak to you. And since he owes me for saving his life from a speeding bus in Santiago, Chile, he pulled some strings. Now, Joe will tell you that I pushed him, but that is a dirty lie. And there's no time to relitigate that now. So nearly a decade ago, when I was assigned to Royal Air Force Menwith Hill, I unknowingly started a journey with international partners and allies, one that I continue on to this day in subsequent assignments, starting with being part of the coalition and Operation Inherent Resolve, and then, as Daron mentioned, Director of Space Forces at US Southcom, and now NATO. We've had the privilege of hearing from General Saltzman just earlier this morning. In 2023, shortly after he took command, he reinvigorated the Space Force's operational focus with 3 lines of effort, and most of you are familiar with those, but just for your benefit, that's fielding a combat-ready force, amplifying the Guardian spirit, and of course, partnering to win, which is the focus of what I want to talk with you about today. And so not to turn this into a bit of a TED Talk or a trip down memory lane for me, But I'll tell you from my experience and on a deeply personal level that I've come to realize that these three lines of effort are inseparable from one another, and that the first two priorities can only be realized when we embrace our international, commercial, and academic mission partners. So from my experience, when we partner, we win. So, oops, did I go the wrong way? No, I didn't. So unsurprisingly, wise commanders from nearly every combatant command and every service branch have included partnering as a key line of effort. Indeed, my own acting commander, Air Marshal Sir Johnny Stringer from the UK, has included partnering even at the NATO alliance, where partnering is a tenet of how the alliance operates. So this key line of effort is critical to the defense and deterrence of the Euro-Atlantic theater. Now, yes, you heard me say that right, Sir Johnny Stringer. The NATO space component, to my knowledge, is the only space unit on Earth that is commanded by a real knight. And as we heard from our senior Monty Python correspondent just moments ago, that makes me his squire, Patsy. So in my life, Partner to Win went from theory to practice when I was assigned to US Southcom. And I'm going to read your minds right now. You're thinking, isn't US Southcom a counter-narcotics combatant command? I know you're thinking that because that's what I was thinking too. And as it turns out, great competition is alive and well in our hemisphere, with both Russia and China exerting predatory influence on our partners south of the border. China, for instance, using the One Belt and Road Initiative, has built out their dual-use space infrastructure, which supports their global interests and undermines ours. That's a huge problem, obviously, and it's one that even the most powerful space force on Earth can't solve by force. We can't win it by force or by using the force like Joe just mouthed. But that's when my first and greatest lesson in partnering was learned. Space security cooperation and space cooperation begins with relationships. This is why anyone who has spent any meaningful time engaged in security cooperation will tell you that we take it very personally. So before I set foot in South America, I got to know 4 fighter pilots who worked as liaison officers at the 12th Air Force. One was from Chile, Peru, one was from Brazil, and one was from Colombia. Now, when I spoke to these men, I realized that China and Russia do not treat their nations like partners, probably clients at best. And even then, the lopsided terms of agreement didn't bring new capabilities to their nations. Now, what's even more astonishing, and don't let the news fool you, it's that these countries prefer partnering with the United States. But to do that, we have to show up. So what I learned from this was bad behavior of our adversaries is a golden opportunity for the US to work with friendly nations and to help them to grow into capable partners within our space community. So at the time, space was not even a legal category in US Code Title 10, Section 333, for those of you who have been engaged in it, that's building partner capacity. So as we were working with partners, as we were going down this path, we also had to bring the US government along with us. And that was probably even a more daunting task. So, like I said, it was daunting to get started, and it wasn't clear what the first step was. I had a chance conversation with my friend Lieutenant Colonel Clay McGillivray, who was, at the time, assigned to the NSDC. And he pointed me to my future partner in crime, Mr. Joe Gerber, right here, dear friend now, after years and years of working together. So Joe was at this new organization called the Joint Commercial Office, now the Joint Commercial Operation. So after a couple of conversations with Joe, who mentioned this thing called Sprint Advanced Concept Training, or SAC-T, I asked Joe if, hey, have you ever done a SAC-T in South America? He said, no. I said, well, how about Chile? He said, well, when can they come to Colorado? No, 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 Joe. When can you come to Santiago? And he said, I can't hear you. I'm packing my bags. Time won't permit me to go into the 3 years of adventures at Southcom that included deploying telescopes, meeting with vice presidents, exercising on a Kratos commercial electronic warfare range, and arranging meetings with World Cup soccer players and astronauts. But I will tell you that when the time came to turn from establishing partnerships to building up our partners into an international team, it was the men and women of the AMOS community who stepped up first to help. Space domain awareness has been the vanguard of space security cooperation, first in South America and now in Africa. At Southcom, we treat security cooperation as the joint fires of outcompeting China, and that's where we aim to keep it. We needed high-tech, affordable solutions, and it was the USAFA Falcon Telescope team, the Maui Raven team, and even Cloudstone that offered those solutions. In the foxhole the whole time with us were Barb Golf, Joe and Kevin O'Rourke, the entire JCO. These folks became inseparable from the Space South team, and as they are today. Today marks nearly 2 years that the JCO and Space Systems Command have partnered with US Southcom to bring the capable Tactical Surveillance and Reconnaissance and Tracking System, TAC-SRT, to the aid of our partners experiencing wildfires, flooding, and other natural disasters. Through these space partnerships, and I can't emphasize this enough, the Space Force has saved countless US and partner lives in the region and brought the system of cooperation among American Air Forces, a 75-year-old organization, into the 21st century with remote sensing, which accelerates the pace of disaster response operations. When we lead with space ops, we often directly engage with the real partner needs that we find. And we bring a deep toolkit to solve these operational issues. And that's where we find common ground. And it is on that common ground where our partners help the Space Force outflank our adversaries. So these small investments for sure will lead to new accesses for space domain awareness. Many sensors and systems, much of which we'll talk about this week, but as important as it is to build up our partners, these investments also reinforce our shared values with these nations, and they help those nations in turn shoulder operational burdens for us. So hard work, sweat, I'm sweating right now, and ingenuity of the SDA community started with a small seed of an idea, but it's now blossomed into $42 million of space security investment in our valued South American partners with 11 SDA telescopes in the works. Congress is now talking about changing the law based on the vision we achieved in Southcom. The work formed the basis of amendments to Section 333 so that space-related activities for all will be included in the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act. It may slip a year, but we're on the right track. We should be proud of that. But what really makes me proud was this community, the guardians, both commercial, civilian, and in uniform. Last month, when there was a terrorist bombing in Cali, Colombia, at the site of the Colombian Space Center, because this was the community that reached out to those folks. And not because we have a line of effort at a combatant command, but because the Colombian Guardians are our friends and our teammates. So out at Ramstein Air Force Base, Germany, the NATO Combined Force Space Component Command has taken the partner to win spirit and applied it to the deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic. NATO has been wildly successful in this mission. It's been over 75 years since an occupying army has stood in the plains of France. Having been at NATO for a year, I understand why. It's because we do all of our fighting in committee in Brussels. But the CFSpCC and our NATO Space Operations Center, the INSPOC, are the epicenter of the NATO space domain operations. Our team is made up of guardians from 16 of the 32 nations, and we are building NATO into an SDA operation. Additionally, we have built a space-based ISR team as part of the NATO ISR force, and we're a key operations center of the Joint Commercial Operations Meridian Watch. We even trained key operations to include JCO 200 and TAC-SRT for all interested NATO nations in the alliance. And I'm proud to say Australia will be sending JCO partners to us to support us during our Steadfast Dual Series later next month. So our organization's rapidly growing. Currently, we sit at 73 flagged billets, is what we call them in NATO parlance, and we're growing to 93. But to answer the question, preempt the question, where do you see yourselves in the next 5 years? As we build our Battle Space Awareness Watch, we like to use the term battle space awareness, not just space domain awareness, because we are very much focused on bringing combat forces and effects to multi-domain operations, where space operators in the loop interacting with tools, not the ones necessarily developing the system. So you train the experts, then send them to us, and we'll make them war fighters in the MDO. But in the next 5 years, we're looking to set the force for command and control at NATO, because that's an important aspect of SACEUR's vision. Grinch wants us to be able to command and control in the NATO scheme of maneuver, not just the EUCOM scheme of maneuver. But this is all happening because like-minded nations realize that the burden of global space operations is a burden that we all must share if we want to enjoy the benefits that space brings. So NATO's senior political body, the North Atlantic Council, has thrown their weight of support behind the space in the alliance. This year marks the beginning of, as Barb mentioned, a $730 million capability program plan that could grow to 1.5 billion euros to build out the INSPOC mission systems. As impressive and necessary as that level of political and financial support to our common defense are, the real strength of the alliance is the cadre of NATO Guardians, growing organically through the NATO Space Operations Center. It's through the shared hours of operations, the continued refinement of processes and skills during steadfast dual and steadfast deterrence exercises, the training pipeline at the CFSpCC, and of course, our beautiful school in Oberammergau, Germany, in case any of you are ski fans. You're all welcome to attend those classes. But through all that, it's become apparent that the Guardians of NATO are developing ethos and culture centered on bringing combined space effects to the deterrence and defense of our homelands. At any given time, up to half the CFSpCC workforce is officers and NCOs on short-term secondments, augmenting our crews, training, learning, even fellowshipping with us. We sharpen their skills and they sharpen us. The CFSpCC is as much a family as we are a team, as you can see from some of these pictures. And I'll admit, there are times when we storm. Negotiations are tough when you have a Greek major and a Turkish lieutenant colonel and only one barbecue grill. For the record, there are no losers in that battle. But partnering is the DNA of the CFSpCC. It runs throughout all our operations, activities, and investments, and it's inseparable from our commander's lines of effort. So I said I was a space evangelist, but zealot is probably a better description. If I'm zealous for one thing, though, it's this. When we get the people aspect right, all of the rest of our problems are manageable. Building the Alliance Guardian culture is as important as nations investing their 5% GDP in military hardware, because it's the Guardians who set the strategy, who write the plans, who understand the terrain, who run the systems that deliver the combat effects to joint commanders. So if there was a silver lining to the Ukraine war and the global pandemic, it could certainly be found at NATO. I'd like to thank Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin, because you've been the catalyst that we needed to modernize the alliance, and we're doing it in spades. In 2023, the North Atlantic Council established the Space Domain CONOPS that prioritizes space warfighting and structure. And I will tell you, from personal experience, that the nations are eager to grow their capabilities and cadres. Our partners are ready. Are we ready to be the partner they need? Are we ready to lead? Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Colonel. We will now start with the question and answers session of this presentation. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to enter them into the tablet. We'll go ahead and open up with a few. You are clearly working closely with the JCO.
That's true.
But to what degree do you feel NATO has intent or desire to have wholly sovereign capabilities available to you?
So per NATO policy, the overarching space policy, NATO does not want to own capabilities for the alliance command structure. We look at the nations as our first force providers. So the nations, and when we say nations, we mean their commercial sectors, their military sectors, their civic sectors. Those are the forces that are provided to NATO first. And our job is to act as integrator into what's called the defense and deterrence of the Euro-Atlantic family of plans, DDA family of plans. So that's how we see that C2 role. But we realize, and NATO realized, that there are certain value-added services that are not broadly available or shared through the 32-member nation alliance, and all need to benefit. So there has been a massive common funded investment starting with space domain awareness and space-based ISR to help fill in some of those gaps. But again, we're not trying to be the CFSpCC, we're not trying to be Space for Europe, we're not trying to be the French Space Command. We are trying to be a good partner to those partners and kind of be that rising tide that elevates all ships.
Excellent, thank you. So from your perspective, what role does commercial play in a future NATO space strategy?
I'm not just saying this because Admiral Bondier at Allied Command Transformation is a massive proponent of commercial space. It's the centerpiece of our capability program plan. We're taking a commercial-first approach. We are trying to be very aggressive in defining the terms of what it means to be a commercial space warfighter, and we're looking to really just be on the ragged edge of what has perhaps been the status quo for how commercial is used in space. Recently, as recent, well, last October, it's recent if you're old, right? So last October, the other day, last October, we had commercial TTX, and the commercial partners that played in that tabletop exercise were asking the right questions. Hey, how do you view us as part of your critical protect and defend architecture? That's a question that we have to wrestle with as NATO. You asked for my personal perspective. I think if you're providing products and services to the alliance to help us prevent our adversaries from taking advantage of the Western alliance, then absolutely you're an asset worth protecting, and we want to partner with you in that way.
Fair, fair. We've only got 30 seconds more left, so one last question. If there is a thing that NATO Space Command would want or could do in the short term, technically, that commercial could support, you would say your most compelling need is what? So
we're leading with two things, and I think I'm in lockstep with Barb. Barb has stepped up with NATO Communications Information Agency to act as what's called host nation for the delivery of our capability program plan. And we've prioritized two things to start. First is TAC SRT and Allied Persistent Surveillance from Space, our commercial and national voluntary scheme for providing remote sensing products, services, and fully TC-petted intelligence products, APSS. I know TAC SRT is not intelligence. So we're leading with that. That's the first area where we need to partner with commercial. And the second, if that would be 1A, 1B, would be the protect and defend architecture. Those value-added services focused on making sure the commercial and the national assets are available when my three joint force component commanders and the three JOAs in NATO need those services. If we don't come with protected services, we're not guaranteeing what they need to do their part of the mission. So that's one reason why we view ourselves as part of the MDO, and I would say commercial is part of that multi-domain operation.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I got the green light for just one more question.
Thanks. That's right, I owe you a coin there.
So will NATO resume holding the space research workshops that were run back in the 1960s?
Say that again?
Right. So,
left field.
Edgar Bering would like to know this. Will NATO resume holding the space research workshops that were run in the 19...
Now, that's probably, so a lot has changed in the intervening 50 or so years. But we have new pathways to innovation, not the least of which is NATO Diana. While I can't speak specifically to those workshops, Diana exists to be an accelerator to help increase the TRL levels and provide that seed money for new entrants into space domain. Very eager to partner with them. One way that we are partnering with them and with the U.S. Space Force front door, Vic Vigliotti and the team, is to establish a NATO commercial front door, the same way to take advantage of the rapidly growing commercial markets throughout Europe and give those companies a way to engage with the alliance and beyond. Because remember, we don't just represent the force structure of the alliance. But we also, just like you, just like Space Systems Command, provide routine advice on how to make investments to spend that 5% so that it can, your capabilities and effects can be integrated into NATO planning. And so, again, take that very personally because we're right at the epicenter of developing those requirements for NATO plans.
All right. Hey, we really appreciate your service both in South America and in NATO. Thank you very much for your contributions.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, round of applause.